We're all going through a journey. Certain people call this journey a roller coaster, with ups and downs and twists and turns. If you're trying to find your way through all the chaos and obstacles of youth, it can be overwhelming. But you're not alone. We'll be sharing stories of others who've faced and overcome similar challenges, and we'll be learning how to reconnect with your faith. The Holy Quran states, "I have not created the jinn and the men, but that they may worship me." As explained over and over by the Prophet ﷺ in his blessed writing, there's a deep and innate attraction that God Almighty has placed in our soul to search for Him. It's a longing to have a connection with Him. But it's buried under so many of our desires. See, we have to find a spark, and we have to find a way to ignite it. And when you do, all those desires go away. That spark is in each and every one of us. We just have to find a way to ignite it. Sometime, God Himself finds a way to start it. Let's look at a story just like this. So enough from me, let's get started.
So as a kid growing up, it was really hard for us to kind of understand what our identity was because, we're not technically fully American, but we're not Pakistani either. So we're kind of in this middle ground where we're kind of.
So, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. How are you doing?
Wa alaikum salam. Good. How are you?
Good. Jazakallah and Jazak for joining us today.
Saud and his family arrived in a new country, new people, new culture, and it was quite the shock.
How old are you?
I am 35 years old. I was raised in America. I was actually born in Germany, and I stayed there for about a year or two before immigrating to America. So I've been living in the West my whole life. My father was the first one to leave Pakistan. He left at a young age due to religious persecution. So at the time, I think it was the early 70s, he was getting persecuted in Pakistan, and he had to leave as soon as possible. So the quickest place he could leave without visas or any of the kind of restrictions was Germany. So that's where he first went, and he tried to establish himself there. So around mid 70s, my parents were married and they were living in Germany. So they were having a lot of issues with the German government as well. So my parents, they reached out to other family members, and there was my mom's sister who lived in America, and she offered to sponsor our family for America.
Yeah, now your parents have two kids,
Mm-hmm.
right? Fairly young. They just came to a whole new country with new rules, new values, new culture.
Mm-hmm.
They resided in Chantilly, Virginia. And how far were you from the masjid?
So in the beginning, we were pretty far because we were in the outskirts of the metropolitan area. So it was a kind of middle to lower class area we were living in, and the closest masjid was in downtown DC, the American Fazl Mosque. So in the very early days, we would be going there for Jama'at events, meetings, classes, and that would take about an hour to get there each way. So it was a pretty long drive.
Yeah, and then we transferred from American Fazl Mosque to Beth Rahman in Maryland. Did the drive get any easier?
No, it actually got worse.
The environment made keeping properly attached to the Jama'at very difficult. However, Saud and his family endured.
So it was hard kind of coming to grasps with that. So, I remember just just pulling my parents having to pull my hair every time they get in the car and go. So it was tough.
He recalls those early days with fondness, and it taught him many lessons that he remembers to this day.
I remember there was a time where we had homework to do to memorize a nazm, or a couplet of the Promised Messiah. And we were given ample time to study for it, memorize it, and recite it. And I happened to be picked that day to recite that nazm. And I actually went up to the microphone, and Misham Shabsab was like, "Go ahead and recite." And I'm like, I didn't memorize it. And from that time on, I made it a point to kind of do my homework and study and make sure that I don't disappoint my teacher.
Adjusting to life in the U.S. while trying to remain faithful to his belief posed many challenges, particularly during the difficult time of youth.
So as a kid growing up, it was really hard for us to kind of understand what our identity was because, we're not technically fully American, but we're not Pakistani either. So we're kind of in this middle ground where we're kind of having to figure out our identity. And on top of that, you have to understand that we're Ahmadis, so we're different from the other, Muslims even. So growing up in school, it was kind of tough because, I didn't know where I belonged. I didn't know what type of social circle I belonged to. So I kind of became reclusive and very introverted. I didn't really have that many friends. I didn't really understand, where I belonged. So that was a tough, growing up struggle for me, just kind of figuring out where I belong in this society, in this country. And so that made it kind of an extra struggle on top of the struggles that kids these days kind of have. It was really hard to talk to your parents about the struggles for kids because they just didn't relate. So it was really hard to talk to my parents about what we were going through. So in school, I didn't really have that many friends, and I didn't have that many friends in the Jama'at as well because we wouldn't see them enough. So I would really rely on my brother, my older brother. He really helped me out in kind of being that second father figure to me, and being that kind of that role model that I needed to kind of bounce off of, and trying to keep me in check.
By Allah's grace, Saud persevered against the peer pressures.
I really didn't have those type of friendships where people are egging you on to do bad things and kind of peer pressuring you into doing bad things. And I feel like just because I was just so shy to talk to people that I never really wanted to get involved in those type of people, groups and friendships. And when I think back about it, it must have been the prayers of my parents or my elders.
What point did you transition from, hey, this is motions of Islam that my parents had given you, to I need to now put my faith above everything else?
During high school, I had the opportunity to go to, like I said, we would go to the Jama'at events, but, they were far and in between. And there was a opportunity where there was a Tarbiyat camp at Bat Rahman. And this camp was about 2 weeks long. This camp brought in all the young kids, boys from all over the country. And we were living in Bat Rahman together, all of us for 2 weeks, where we prayed together, where we learned together, where we ate and played. And, we just established this, brotherhood amongst us. And, before that, like I said, like you were asking, I was just doing these motions, just because. But now, it's living in that environment for 2 weeks with your brothers and praying all your prayers on time, reading the Quran Majid, writing to the Khalifa, studying Islam and getting your questions answered. All of that stuff just started to click in my mind. Like, this is the truth. Like, this is true. Everything is true. Everything that my parents have been teaching me is true. And, I understand now. And now I feel like a spark has been lit inside me now, because after that camp, I was still motivated. I wanted to wake up after Fajr, the day after the camp ended, when I was at home. So, that really transformed me, I think, from doing it just as the motions versus doing it now because it's like a quenching of the thirst. It's something that I really desire to do now from the heart, and I really want to do it and progress and progress and progress. And from then on, I made a firm resolve to pray and seek God from the heart. And alhamdulillah, I'm seeing the fruits of that now.
The camp at headquarters in Maryland, USA really transformed Saud's mentality and viewpoint regarding his faith.
Once that camp ended, I made a firm resolve to pray to God from the heart, and to pour my heart out, and just to see how much I can, how much it grows. So I made this resolve. Back in the day, I don't know if you remember, we used to have these little apps on our computer, and there was a Muslim app or something that kind of played the azan really loud. So I remember the first day coming back, I cranked my speakers up, and I put I kept my computer on all night, and I kept the time for Fajr on. And once the Fajr time hit, the speakers started blasting, and my whole house, everybody, my mom and dad were like, "What's going on?" Like, so it was one of those things where I used every means possible to kind of keep me in check.
Every means possible to keep me in check. These are some interesting words from Saud. It makes me reflect on everything we're connected to, from our possessions to our relationships, to our family, that these should or ought to help us transform every day.
My parents, when they saw the shift, they saw the azan blaring out and the speakers, they're like, what's going on? And then, we would read the mosque together, and then I would start reciting these long surahs, and then my mom would be like, oh, where did you, how did you learn this surah? And then I would tell her that, when I'm in school, I have free time, so I'm just like memorizing Quran. And, it was kind of like a shock to them, because they kind of see me being this kind of average guy that's doing his own thing, to now, he's doing namaz on time, memorizing Quran, and, he's doing all these things. So it was, I think, a pleasant surprise for them. And, they were happy about it.
After the challenges of youth and teen years comes an important stage of marriage, which can be a very stressful time of life indeed.
What was the most important thing when you were looking for a spouse?
I really prayed for, a really righteous spouse, a righteous person that understands me, that kind of can help me grow and help me be a better person. So that was the main thing that I was looking for in a spouse, somebody who puts their faith over all worldly matters. So, that encompasses, Islam and Ahmadiyyat and Khilafat, and, having those roots established really strong.
Where was Hazur in this transition, in your growth?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my relationship with Khilafat is very interesting as well. Like I said, growing up, we would see Hazur Khalifatul Masih Rabi Rahimahullah. He would come to America fairly often growing up, and for the jalsas. As kids, we didn't really understand the connection. We didn't understand, the blessings of attaching ourselves to the Khilafat. And so growing up, once I started getting more involved in the Jama'at, getting more involved in, our in faith, I realized that, Khilafat is a major part of the success in growing in Islam as well. So from there, through these activities, we are always introduced that you can write letters to Hazur, you can write letters to the Khalifa. So I started doing that. And then, I would start getting, some guidance and understanding, and, and then I had opportunities to go to London and meet him and actually talk to him and get guidance from him directly. And then, I put my faith in what the Khalifa was saying, and I did it. And I saw the fruits and the blessings of obeying the Khalifa and listening to him, and kind of seeing what he, and kind of doing what he's asking me to do. So those things kind of all accumulated into a understanding that there's no life without Khalifa. There's no Jamaat. There's no, understanding of faith without attaching ourselves to the Khalifa. And, just by seeing it kind of come true in front of your own eyes, that kind of makes you want to kind of stay attached to it forever, and make sure that, you never leave this attachment.
महक में डूबी हुई रोशनी न थी, सब्ज़े पे ऐसी नूर की चादर बिछी न थी, किरणों का रंग फैलता जाता है दूर दूर.
Having experienced growing up in America above all other things, Saud desired to impart one thing to his children.
One message that I want to instill in my kids, and I would kind of share with any other person who would be listening, is to follow the fundamentals that your parents are teaching you and they're establishing at a young age. You might not understand it, you might not comprehend it, it might be annoying, it might be like a seen as a burden, but just kind of trust your parents. I tell my son, kind of just do the actions of the prayers, pray with us and just do the actions, just to establish their kind of Islamic identity.
Establishing Islamic identity for kids. Saud has touched on a very important topic, something that we must adapt to at a very early age. Through our conduct, this has to be an example. Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, may Allah be his helper, has mentioned this many times, that we shouldn't feel any sort of inferiority complex.
So they know what prayer is, they know what Quran Majid is, and they know the importance of it. So when they grow up, we have that expectation or that hope that one day these roots that we're establishing will flourish and kind of grow.
Saud's advice is not just restricted to his children. In fact, his experience can resonate with anyone in the same position, whether a young person or a parent.
My advice for any of the young Ahmadis growing up here, especially in the West, you might be struggling. You might have the conflict between your culture, your religion versus the culture and religion of the West. And you might be struggling, like I struggle, to understand the importance of it, but continue to listen to your parents, continue to learn, continue to listen to your teachers, to your elders, and kind of understand these things that you might not understand it now, but continue doing it, continue doing those prayers, continue reading the Quran Majid, continue going to your Sunday classes and your Jummah prayers and all these activities that the Jama'at has.
Saud gives the same advice to all. Stick to the Islamic practices no matter what. As you continue with life and grow in faith, these practices will make more sense.
You will understand why you're doing it later on and seek God from the heart and put it to the test. I would say, put your heart and soul out in front of God and see how he responds and see how it flourishes. And I'm 100% sure that God will not leave you hanging. He won't leave you unanswered, and you'll see the power of prayers and the power and the truth of the Shamat right before your eyes.
Yeah, 100%.
Allah Almighty has placed a spark and attraction in all of us, and that spark's His love. He's given us so many opportunities to ignite it in our hearts. Then we have a choice whether to choose to walk on that path or to walk away. Allah the Almighty has said, He does not change a people until they change themselves. I hope everyone finds that spark they're looking for. Join us again for another inspiring story on Finding My Faith.